Hi, and welcome to Higgs Guides. This is going to be an introduction to what Higgs Guides is all about. First thing I want you to know is something about me. My name is James Higgs. I come from a long background of living a lot of different places. I was born here in Michigan, just south of Lansing. I was starting to grow up in Mason, Michigan from 0 to 7 years old. At that time, we lived in what I called the White House. It was this white two-story house at the corner of two of the main roads in town, about 6 blocks from downtown. While we lived there, we were relatively poor. Both of my parents were in college, and my dad had a job as a manager at an A&P grocery store, the A&P there in Mason, Michigan. Uh, Around age 7, my parents took the great leap and took us to Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, we started working at a fledgling Puerto Rico Christian schools that was meeting in garages and started working at a small church that just started, Puerto Rico Christian Church. We were there as missionaries for about 5 years, 6 years. It's where I learned Spanish fluently. So I've had a lot of different jobs, and some of them involve Spanish, and that's because I learned Spanish while growing up in Puerto Rico as the son of a missionary. Around age 14, my dad had a heart attack while in Puerto Rico, and we ended up coming back to the United States. We moved to Jackson, Michigan, where my parents finished their degrees at Spring Arbor College in Ann Arbor, Michigan, while we lived in Jackson. And then for high school, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. Went to Tri-Cities High School in Atlanta, Georgia, the Tri-Cities High School. It may not be famous to you, but it has some famous names that went to it. My name is James Higgs. I am not one of them, although I may be someday. There was a guy named, um, what is his name? He's from Saturday Night Live, and does a great job. That I went to high school with, and also the band Outcast. I went to high school with the band Outcast there in the '90s in Tri Cities High School. I'm sure I'll be talking more about my stories from Tri Cities High School and my stories from Puerto Rico. But after high school, I was recruited big to play football. I was also recruited to Ivy League schools, and I decided after my house burned down that I was going to have none of it. I ended up going to a small school called Great Lakes Christian College in Lansing, Michigan, where I got a bachelor's degree in religious education and in ministry. I learned to preach. I learned to counsel. I learned to love the Bible and to love people. And this is what Great Lakes Christian College has taught me to do. They really do create a servant atmosphere and encourage people to go into servant leadership. After that, I left and I was in the ministry a few years. In ministry up here in central to western Michigan, a place called Barrington Church of Christ for a couple of years. After that, I moved to Indiana and Illinois for ministry for a couple of years. During that time, when I was 25 and my dad was 50, my father suddenly passed away. He had never recovered from the heart attack that had taken us away from Puerto Rico, and my whole life was kind of falling apart. He was kind of the rock that I clung on to. He and I were best friends. We talked almost every day while I was in college and almost every day while I was in ministry. After his death, I felt like I couldn't do ministry anymore. I was searching for a new place. I left ministry at that time and took a battery of tests that said I should either become an entrepreneur or I should go to law school. So I took a battery of tests on whether or not I should go to law school. Scored close to a perfect score on something called the LSAT, the Law School Admissions Test, and a place called Cooley Law School in Lansing, Michigan offered me a full academic scholarship to come there. I uprooted my wife and I. We moved to Lansing, and I started attending Cooley Law School. We'd been trying to have children for 6 or 7 years, and were unable to. And so, of course, me going to law school was the trigger, and my wife became pregnant that first semester I was in law school. We had our first baby, Jasmine, while I was in law school, and I continued in law school and getting good grades, but I also went to work managing convenience stores and getting a type of a business degree on the side, and managed convenience stores for the 4 years I was in law school. And, and during that time, we had a second child, Chloe Higgs. And I graduated from law school second in my class. I got the third highest bar score in the state of Michigan, and I went to work for a big law firm. One thing I knew about that big law firm is that it wasn't for me and it was collapsing. It was during that time when, if you're in Michigan, you remember that General Motors went through a bankruptcy, and this law firm was tied to workers' compensation and disability rights of mainly GM employees. The whole place was kind of falling apart, and I knew I didn't want to be working that 80 hours a week. One of the crazy things they did while I was there was they tied me to uh, the Saginaw office as my starting point. They assigned me to the Flint office lawyers as my primary assignment, and the Flint office lawyers assigned me to go to Detroit to handle the workers' compensation court in Detroit almost exclusively, and then to take doctors' depositions in the Detroit area right after court every day. So I was leaving my house about 5 a.m. and doing depositions till 7 a.m. in Detroit and getting back to my house about 10 p.m. every day. And I did that for about a year and a half. During that, my son David was born, and he almost died of pneumonia while I was trying to work my 80-hour weeks, and decided that just wasn't for me. Something big happened in my life. I decided to hang a shingle and learn how to practice law on my own. And when I tried to do that, I went to look to renting office space, and my real estate agent that was helping me out said, "You need to meet my friend who's an attorney, James Stein. He needs help." And I walked into the office of this guy named James T. Stein. He'd been an attorney in the Mount Pleasant area for 35 years, and he had severe Parkinson's. And he basically said, "I'm going to sell you my firm on a contract that's only going to require you to pay interest of $500 a month." So I bought a law firm, and so I went from preaching to law school to managing convenience stores to working in a big firm to owning my own law firm in just a few years. I owned that law firm and worked at that law firm for about 15 years. I really, really enjoyed it. I had a lot of good clients. I was constantly behind on my work because client care was so much more important to me mentally and physically than the actual grind of getting the work done. So it was never really a good fit for me to run my own law firm, but we made a good living. We enjoyed our time there. What happened to that is COVID hit. I shut down my law firm for a while, and then I got sick 4 times during COVID. 3 of those times was COVID, and then I got a bacterial infection that nearly floored me and left me hospitalized. So after that, the firm had fallen apart. I'd lost all of my employees but my wife, and I tried picking the pieces back up, but I just didn't feel like I had the energy and stamina to keep that up. So I decided once again to try and hire into a big firm. I hired into a big firm. It was named Goldman and Associates, one of the best family law firms in the state. I enjoyed working for them. I traveled for them. I was a remote attorney working out of home, but I traveled to a lot of courts, and I really enjoyed the work. But over time, some of the difficulties of working with a big firm once again reared their head. Some of the client care stuff was difficult for me, and I had some tragic stuff happen in the practice of law that I decided it was time to leave the practice of law and see where God was leading me next. Interestingly, an ICE detention center was opening nearby to where I live. Obviously, if you've been seeing anything in the news, you know that ICE has opened detention centers in a lot of places, and they're dealing with a lot of detainees and a lot of people that they're trying to deport from the United States. And these detention centers are open to make sure everybody gets their due process. So don't believe it when people say these guys aren't getting due process. Every one of them's getting due process, getting to court multiple times before they have any chance of even going home voluntarily. They end up in court most of the time, more than once. So don't believe people when they say they aren't there, because what I ended up doing is I applied just to be a detention officer, because I thought, you know what, that's a good position, kind of low stress, but where I could use my Spanish speaking ability and do well. That place found out that I spoke Spanish and asked if I would like to be the interpreter. I signed up immediately to be the interpreter. They put me through a few communication tests where people called me that were fluent in Spanish, and we spoke Spanish a few times, and I ended up being the interpreter there. After a few months of interpreter, doing well as interpreter, which was this past May that I got that job, May 2025, they switched me and asked if I could fill in as the job of chaplain, because they knew of my pastoral role. And the whole thing came full circle. So all of my education, I got associate's degree and a bachelor's degree. During that time, I got another bachelor's degree in education. I went to Lincoln Christian Seminary and got most of my master's of ministry degree. I left from there and went to law school and got my JD, my Juris Doctor degree, and I became a lawyer. And with all of these degrees and all of that, I came full circle, and now I'm chaplain at one of the largest ICE detention centers in the United States. It's a great role for me. I'm preaching to about 450 detainees every weekend, and loving what I do. It also has freed up my mind and freed up my time to put some of my thoughts in order. So here's what Higgs Guides are all about. Now that you know some of my history, I'm going to be going deeper into my history in a lot of these podcasts. But here's what Higgs Guides are all about. Higgs Guides is all about taking the information I've gleaned through years of study and years of constant reading, because I read probably 15, 20 hours a day, and most of it news and most of it informational. I do very little pleasure reading. I love to read encyclopedic type of things and to learn new information. But it's taking that information that I learn and I glean and trying to put it not only in an interesting place, an interesting outlet for my intelligent energy that God has blessed me with, but also to help people understand the conservative Christian nature of how we deal with what's going on in the world today. So basically what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be calling the Higgs Guides, but they're going to focus on 4 separate areas, really 5, but I'm going to talk about 4 first, and then we'll talk about the 5th one. The first area that we're talking about here is we're going to be talking about current events and political items. So as a conservative Christian, as a compassionate conservative, as I call myself, I want to reboot the compassionate conservative movement. There's been a lot of talk about this guy Charlie Kirk, and he was a compassionate conservative. What I consider that is someone that understands who Jesus was and understands the compassion that Jesus has, and understands that Jesus was all about the truth, and applies compassion and truth to the current events of the day, so that all politics and all current events can revolve around where's God moving and where's Christ moving us as his people toward his movement. So that's part of current events and politics is going to be all about how do we as Christian conservatives fit into the current political and current events climate. Some of this may be kind of caustic, and I apologize for that. Jesus was kind of caustic when he confronted certain things. And I don't mean to sound caustic at times, but at times the truth sounds caustic. I am not hateful. I have compassion for everybody, but I also want people to know the truth, and at times people think the truth is caustic, and I apologize for that. Remember, it was our Savior that overturned tables and chased people out of the temple with whips. And it was our Jesus that called people empty tombs and said they were filled with dead man's bones. And he was, when he needed to be caustic about the situation so that people could understand the sins and things they were involved with, he was caustic. He also didn't allow people to live in their sins. He didn't chastise people or condemn people for their sins. What he wanted people to do is to come to faith in him and to understand their sin. And so he always loved the sinner, but he confronted the sin, and he constantly told people, don't do that anymore. Go and sin no more. It's found throughout the New Testament. And so part of my what I'm going to be doing when I talk about these current events is talking about where we are at in the world, where Jesus would want us to be, where God would want us to be, applying his word to it, but also just applying some common sense conservative principles to what we believe. And that's going to be the current events politics side. The next side is going to be religion and Bible. The second kind of podcast I'm going to do, we're going to talk about specific Bible areas and specific religious things. And we're going to talk a lot about the church and where the church is going. I'm going to be talking about a lot of biblical subjects. I think I'm going to read the whole Bible in the King James Version into YouTube. I just love to read the Bible, and I'm fairly good at reading it and pronouncing words properly and all of that. And the King James Version is not a copyrighted version, so anybody can read it into YouTube that wants to. So before I discuss a chapter or a verse or something like that, I'm probably going to spend a separate little video or podcast or time putting that into the grand universe of YouTube on my religion and Bible portion of my Higgs Guide YouTube channel. And so there's going to be a lot on the Bible. I preach a lot, and so I'm going to develop the subjects of my sermon into lessons and devotionals for our podcast area. And sometimes I might read my sermon or preach my sermon right into here so you can understand what I say on a Sunday morning. And then I'll begin posting on the website, HIGGSGUIDE.com, the devotionals that go along with that sermon. And over time, we'll develop a good scripture, devotionals, sermons, and arguments from the Bible about all sorts of subjects. I'm not going to confront a subject because it is a current event. That's going to be in the current events portion. I'm going to confront the subject because it's biblical. We're going to go through the Bible systematically. Not directly. I'm not going to go Genesis through Revelation. I'm going to jump around to where I feel like touching and things at any single point. But we're going to go through the Bible systematically until we cover every verse in the Bible and make sure it's all read into YouTube, but also it's all properly exegeted is the fancy word for making sure it's properly understood and applied. We're going to do exegesis on the Bible, and we're going to make sure that we can everyone fully understands the Bible. That's the Bible portion. The next portion is going to be just discussing Supreme Court cases. The third of the four things I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be pulling up old Supreme Court cases, all the foundational ones. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what the Supreme Court does and doesn't do, so you need to understand all of the former really important Supreme Court cases. I think I have like 78 that I'm going to get through that are the old cases. I'm going to mix those in with new cases as they come up. We're going to start probably 5 years ago with some of the important cases that started 5 years ago and go forward to the current day and then keep us up to date on the current Supreme Court cases and what's going on in the Supreme Court. Every session I'll be going through the new cases and what the Supreme Court did and didn't decide and how those cases went and discussing each case by case. So that's going to be a long project of developing Supreme Court cases and case law so people can understand what's happening as a nation in our federal court system and as a nation in the direction that our court system is going. I'm also a Michigan attorney, so I'm going to have a whole section of my website on Higgs Guides about Michigan law. I'm going to do some podcasts specifically on Michigan law. Some of you in the national audience probably aren't going to follow that real closely, but if you're in the Michigan audience, you may want to follow it closely. I'm going to offer a lot of resources on there. I'm going to offer some low-cost legal resources so that I can help you, file your lawsuits or get out of your lawsuits or defend your lawsuits. All in pro per stuff. If I run into something where I say you really should just have an attorney, I'll tell you that. But if it's something I feel like I could advise you for inexpensively and provide you the documents you need and draft some documents for you, I'd like to develop that relationship with people so that we can lower the cost of going to court and protecting your rights. I have a lot of expertise in everything from landlord-tenant to family law to general litigation to immigration type of stuff. There's a lot of areas where I can help people develop their own cases and make sure they can represent themselves, and I'm going to do that on there. There's going to be a lot of blogs about different types of law, a lot of podcasts about different types of law, and a lot of resources and things like that. All four of these pages, those are the basic 4 pages, all 4 of them are going to have links to important information for you to find. All 4 of them are going to provide generic information like where do you find court stuff in Michigan, where do you find the best political stuff on the web. And so that type of stuff is going to be available there. In addition, they're going to have specific resources of mine. Some of these I'm going to put up for free. Some of these are going to be subscriptions, inexpensive subscriptions, but pay subscriptions nonetheless, where you get stuff directly from me about the topics that I'm covering. Other things are just going to be monetized. I mean, I'm going to put all these things, including this video, up on YouTube, and as people watch it, hopefully if people enjoy it and my crowd grows, we'll be able to monetize it, and I can make a little bit of money at this so that I can provide better and higher quality resources in the future so that in all things, as is always the case, God may be glorified and Christ may be exalted to his throne. And I'm going to pray for all of you that are here before I close here. Dear God, there's going to be people listening and watching these Higgs Guides. We're going to pray for them and lift them up that these resources might be useful in their life, but not just that, but that they'll hear your word and apply your word, and that they'll give you all the glory. Make this a miraculous thing in your sight so that people will know that you are God and that we are your people, that we are the sheep of your pasture. Thank you for everything, especially for your Son, Jesus Christ, that died on the cross for us and that resurrected to give us a new life. Please help us live that new life through him. For it's in his name we pray. Amen.